All right, so new beginnings, right? New chapter kind of vibes. It can be exciting, but also a little scary all at the same time. We're going deep on this one. 15 powerful tips to start a new chapter in life. From the website, Tickled Think. And don't worry, we'll help you sort through it all.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The author really puts themselves out there, talking about going through big changes back in 2022,
Hmm.
and honestly, not being ready to let go of the past at first.
It makes you realize we've all kind of been there at some point. Speaking of processing those feelings, the first few tips are all about well, breathing and being kind to yourself. Sometimes it's easy to forget the simple things.
Yeah, they seem pretty obvious, but when life, throws those curveballs, remembering to actually breathe and, cut yourself some slack, that can be huge.
Absolutely. And then there's tip number 3, don't bottle things up. Ugh, I know I've definitely been guilty of that. But the article really pushes acknowledging those tougher emotions.
Yeah, and there's a good reason for that. Imagine, you know, trying to build something new while carrying around a ton of emotional baggage. It just doesn't work. The article's author talks about going to therapy, and confronting those bottled up emotions was really the key to being able to move on.
Yeah, it's like, you've got to clear out the clutter before you redecorate, right? Which brings us to tips 4 and 5, routines and those pesky toxic habits. I know routines can feel a bit rigid sometimes, but when you're starting fresh, they can be like an anchor.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about being a robot or anything. It's more about creating some structure that helps support your goals. There's a lot of research on habit formation, and it shows that even small changes to our routines can have a huge impact on our lives.
Yeah, and while you're at it, why not ditch those habits that are holding you back? The article uses this spring cleaning analogy. I love that.
Yeah, it's all about making space for the new you. The author even gets pretty specific here. They talk about finally quitting smoking, something they had been trying to do for years, and how it was a big part of starting their new chapter. It wasn't just willpower, it was finally being ready to let go of that old version of themselves.
That's great. Okay, but here's where things get really fun. Tip number 6 is all about trying new things. New chapter, new adventures.
It's more than just, you know, checking things off a bucket list. Trying new things actually changes our brains. Neuroplasticity is what they call it. But basically, our brains can adapt and grow throughout our lives. And new experiences help that process along.
So it's not just about having fun, it's actually good for us.
I love that. It's like a workout for your brain. The more you challenge yourself with new experiences, the more adaptable and resilient you become.
All right, tips 7 and 8. This is where things get a little introspective. Reflection and revisiting goals. The article asks, what did you learn from that previous chapter? Where do you want to go from here? Do your past goals still align with who you want to be? Pretty deep stuff.
Yeah, think of it like you wouldn't set off on a road trip without checking the map first.
Right.
So this is about, you know, taking stock of where you are, where you want to go, making sure your goals are still taking you in the right direction.
And once you have that clarity, the article suggests making a plan. Tip number 9.
It makes sense, right? A plan isn't about restricting yourself. It's about creating a framework to actually achieve your goals. The article really emphasizes breaking things down into those smaller steps. It feels less overwhelming that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads perfectly into tip number 10. Take it one day at a time. Because big changes, they can feel overwhelming.
It's a classic piece of advice.
Yeah.
One day at a time. But so true. Our brains are wired to focus on the present. When we get caught up in worrying about the future or, regretting the past, it drains our energy and makes it harder to move forward.
I think that's where people get tripped up sometimes. We want the results now, but the journey is just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about enjoying the process, celebrating the small wins, and trusting that, things will unfold as they should.
Speaking of enjoying the process, tip number 11 is all about self-love. The article really emphasizes that starting a new chapter is a great chance to prioritize yourself and your well-being.
Yeah, so much of the time, we're focused on what we should be doing, who we should be. A new chapter is a chance to rewrite that. It's about deciding who you want to be and giving yourself permission to pursue that.
So self-love check, but how do we actually, put all these great ideas into practice? It's one thing to talk about gratitude and new routines and all that, but actually doing it, that's the tricky part.
Yeah, you're right. It takes more than just good intentions. But luckily, the article gives us some actual strategies. One that really stood out to me was journaling. Not just for venting or whatever, but for really exploring your emotions, tracking your progress, even visualizing your future self.
It's like that saying, a goal without a plan is just a wish. But there's something about the act of journaling itself. It helps us process things, doesn't it?
Totally. It forces you to slow down, really examine your thoughts and feelings. Plus, when you write things down, it's almost like making a contract with yourself. It makes you more committed to those goals.
Okay, so journaling check. The article also talks about creating a supportive environment, which makes sense. You can't build a new chapter if you're surrounded by negativity all the time, right?
Exactly. It's about being intentional with who you spend time with, what you're reading or watching, even what activities you choose to do. You know, this could mean setting boundaries with people who drain your energy, or finding communities that share your values and goals.
It's like building the foundation for your new life. But even with the best support system, those negative thoughts can still creep in. How do we deal with that?
Well, the article spends a lot of time on mindset, like challenging negative thoughts, focusing on the positive, even using affirmations. It's all about reframing how you see yourself and your situation.
I guess so much of it is self-talk, isn't it? If we keep telling ourselves we're not good enough, or that we're going to fail, well, we probably will.
Exactly, like those self-fulfilling prophecies. But the good news is we can change those thought patterns. The more we focus on the positive, the more we train our brains to see possibilities instead of problems.
And that ties into the article's emphasis on celebrating progress, even the small wins.
Because every step forward, no matter how small, it deserves to be acknowledged. It helps build momentum, reinforces that you're on the right track, and let's be real, celebrating those wins just feels good. It makes us more likely to keep going.
For sure. And you don't have to go through this alone. The article reminds us to reach out for support when we need it.
Yeah, it's like having a co-pilot on a long journey. Sometimes you need someone to help you navigate, offer a different perspective, or just listen without judgment. That could be a friend, a family member, a therapist, even a mentor.
A lot of us feel like we need to have it all figured out before we can ask for help, but the truth is everyone needs support sometimes.
Absolutely. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It actually shows strength. It shows you're committed to growth and that you're willing to do what it takes to succeed.
So true. And speaking of succeeding, the article doesn't sugarcoat it. Starting a new chapter. It isn't always easy. There will be setbacks.
Yeah, and those can be tough to deal with, especially if we buy into that whole new year, new me thing, where everything is supposed to be perfect. The author actually talks about relapsing into an old habit and how at first they felt like a failure.
Yeah, but then they realized it was actually a valuable lesson.
Exactly. Setbacks happen. It's how we deal with them that matters. The article talks about viewing setbacks as opportunities, opportunities to learn and grow, not as reasons to give up.
It's like that quote, fall 7 times, stand up 8. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about getting back up and trying again.
Yeah, the article encourages readers to ask themselves, what can I learn from this? Instead of dwelling on the negative, it's a small change in perspective, but it can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And sometimes the biggest challenges come from within, right? Like those limiting beliefs and that self-doubt, that can hold us back.
Oh, for sure. The article talks about recognizing those inner critics and challenging those negative thoughts, replacing self-doubt with self-compassion and belief in your own abilities.
Which is so much easier said than done, right?
It is. It's a process. But the more we practice self-compassion, the more we build up that inner strength and that resilience. That helps us face challenges with more confidence.
I like that. And it's not just about our internal world, right? The article also talks about those external factors. That can make change difficult.
Yeah, things like societal pressures, expectations from family and friends, even just the chaos of everyday life. These can all create resistance and make it harder to move forward.
So how do we navigate that?
The article suggests a few things: setting boundaries, being clear about your goals with those around you, and finding communities that support your growth. It's all about creating an environment that helps you make the changes you want.
Like creating a safe haven for yourself, right? Amidst all the craziness. A place where you can recharge and refocus on what really matters.
Exactly. And it's not about isolating yourself. It's about choosing the influences you let into your life.
Right, and that can also apply to how we choose to spend our time and energy. The article talks about prioritizing activities that align with our values and goals.
It's about saying no to things that drain us, even if we feel like we should be doing them. It's about giving ourselves permission to pursue what truly lights us up,
Yeah.
even if it means stepping outside our comfort zone or going against what society expects.
It's about reclaiming our power, creating a life that is true to who we are.
Yeah, and that authenticity, it lets us connect with others in a deeper way. The article talks about the importance of being vulnerable, sharing our stories, both the good and the bad.
Because let's be real, no one has it all figured out. We're all just doing our best.
Exactly, when we can be honest about that, when we let go of needing to be perfect, it creates space for more genuine connections.
It's like we're all in this together, supporting each other along the way. And that support can make a huge difference, especially when we're facing challenges or feeling lost.
It reminds us that we're not alone, that there are people who understand and who are willing to help.
That's so important. And you know, something else the article talks about is acknowledging our past experiences, both the good and the bad. It's not about dwelling on the past, it's about learning from it.
Yeah, it's about weaving those threads of our past into the tapestry of our present to create a richer picture of who we are.
And that includes the parts of ourselves we might not be so proud of, the mistakes we've made, the times we've fallen short.
Absolutely. The article talks about the importance of self-forgiveness. It's not about condoning harmful actions. It's about acknowledging that we're all human. We all make mistakes.
It's about letting go of the shame and guilt that can keep us stuck.
And that forgiveness extends to others too. The article encourages us to let go of resentment and anger towards those who have hurt us. It's not about condoning what they did. It's about freeing ourselves from those negative emotions.
Choosing peace over pain, understanding over judgment.
And that can be so freeing. It lets us break free from the past and step into a future full of possibility.
And speaking of hope, the article ends on a really inspiring note. It talks about the power of belief, believing in ourselves, believing in our dreams, believing that we can create the life we want.
It's about shifting our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from focusing on what we lack to focusing on what we have to offer.
It's about recognizing our own worthiness and giving ourselves permission to pursue our passions, to take risks, to live a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling.
And it's about trusting that, even when things get tough, even when we stumble, we have the strength to get back up and keep going.
You know, it's interesting, this whole idea of starting a new chapter, it seems to resonate with a lot of people. It's more than just a personal thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it taps into something bigger. We're living in a time of constant change and everything,
Yeah.
which can be exciting, but also kind of unsettling, you know?
Yeah.
So it's natural to want to reinvent ourselves, to find some purpose,
Yeah.
some direction in all the chaos.
And these days, there's so much pressure to have it all figured out, to always be striving for, like, the best version of ourselves. Social media doesn't exactly help with that, does it?
It's tough. It's a double-edged sword for sure. On the one hand, it can connect us with inspiring stories and communities, but it also creates this pressure to have these perfect lives with these crazy, unrealistic expectations. The article actually talks about this, reminding us to be mindful of what we're consuming online and to focus on our own unique journey.
It's so easy to compare ourselves to others, especially online, but everyone's journey is different, right?
Exactly. What works for one person might not work for another. That's where self-awareness is so important. The article talks about knowing your values, your strengths, and what truly makes you happy. It's not about copying someone else's idea of success. It's about creating a life that feels authentic to you.
That makes sense. But how do we balance that desire for growth with accepting ourselves as we are right now? It seems kind of like a paradox.
It can feel that way. But think of it like this. You can't build a strong foundation on shaky ground. Accepting ourselves, even with our flaws, is the starting point for real growth. It's about recognizing that we're already whole, even as we're constantly changing and growing.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, embracing the messiness of life, knowing that it's all part of the journey.
Right, and that journey, it's not something we have to do alone. The article really emphasizes connection, reaching out to others for support, for inspiration, even for accountability.
Yeah, because going it alone is tough. We all need that support system. People who get us, who support our dreams, who remind us that we're not alone.
The author talks about how isolating it was to go through those big life changes alone. It wasn't until they started opening up to others that things began to change for the better.
It's a good reminder that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's actually a strength. It helps us connect with people on a deeper level.
And speaking of ups and downs, the article ends with this quote from Nelson Mandela. "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall."
Such a powerful quote. It reminds us that setbacks are going to happen. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about how we deal with it.
Starting a new chapter. It's not about achieving some perfect life. It's about embracing the journey, the messy parts, the beautiful parts, the unpredictable parts. It's about becoming who we're meant to be.
It's about showing up for ourselves, even when it's hard. And trusting that we have the strength to make it through.
And remember, you're not alone. There are people who care about you. There are resources out there to support you. And there are so many possibilities waiting to be discovered. So take a deep breath, believe in yourself, and embrace the adventure.
That's it for our deep dive into starting a new chapter. We hope you found it helpful, maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep creating the life you are meant to live.